Oh, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about my week number 15 must-start and must-sit players for fantasy football in 2021. Inside today's video, we're going to begin by going in-depth into my must-start players of the week, and then about halfway into the video, we're going to be pivoting into my must-sit players based upon their matchups for week number 15. But before we could get on into things, I would like to ask, if you are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, to please make sure that you do hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure to hit that like button down below. It would help us out a ton. And if you would like to follow me on Twitter, please do so at Notorious FNTSY. So without further ado, let's get into my week number 15 must start and must sit players. We begin with the must start category, headlined by wide receiver of the Las Vegas Raiders, Hunter Renfrow, going up against the Cleveland Browns this week in Cleveland on Saturday. Despite the Las Vegas Raiders offense being damn near putrid over the last two games, Hunter Renfrow has still been a dominant force on the team and in terms of fantasy football. Last week, up against the Kansas City Chiefs, like I said, this Raiders offense has been terrible over the last two games. Their last good game was up against the Cowboys on Thanksgiving. Even though they weren't really able to do anything offensively up against the Kansas City Chiefs, Hunter Renfrow dominated. 13 receptions on 14 targets for 117 yards and a touchdown. He is currently sitting as the wide receiver number 16 in half PPR and should be considered every single week to be a must-start wide receiver. Yet, most people just don't give this guy the respect that he deserves. He deserves the respect, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if he finished as a top 12 wide receiver in half PPR at the end of the season. This guy is a target monster game in and game out, and I love him this week up against the Cleveland Browns. The biggest question mark with Hunter Renfrow in this game is, when does this game even get played? Because there have been so many COVID cases on the Cleveland Browns. Do they shift this game off of Saturday? Does it go to Sunday? Does it go to Monday? Do they play a Tuesday game like they did last year? That'll be something interesting to figure out. But if this game plays, which I assume it will, Hunter Renfrow is going to dominate. Also, Darren Waller isn't playing in this game. If I'm being honest with you, does that really matter at all? It does kind of give a little bit more of a neck up for Hunter Renfrow because he will be seeing even more targets. But even if Darren Waller was playing in this game, which he's not, I would still be very comfortable playing Hunter Renfrow. The next player to talk about here as a must-start player on the week is Taysom Hill, quarterback of the New Orleans Saints, going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this week in Tampa Bay. Taysom Hill is the perfect example of a player that exemplifies how fantasy football and the real world NFL are wildly different. This is because he is far from a great quarterback, but due to the amount of times that he rushes every single game, he is able to finish as a top-end quarterback, scoring over 20 points in his last two starts, despite not really being all that good of a quarterback. When you watch him, you're like, wow, this guy isn't very good. But at the end of every single week, the guy is finishing as a top-end option. Last week, up against the New York Jumbo Jets, he had 15 completions on 21 attempts for 175 passing yards. But the kicker, the reason why he has so many fantasy points, is because he rushed 11 times for 73 yards and not one, but two touchdowns. While the matchup up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is certainly not an easy one, this is far from a soft serve, a cupcake matchup, I still believe that Taysom Hill will provide value to your roster due to the fact that he's probably going to rush the ball 10 to 15 times in this game like he's a chicken with his head cut off. Again, Taysom Hill, not the greatest NFL quarterback, probably not going to provide any value throwing the football, but with the amount he rushes game in and game out, you just have to start Taysom Hill at this point in the season. My next must-start player is Zach Ertz, tight end of the Arizona Cardinals, going up against the Detroit Lions in Detroit this week. With DeAndre Hopkins expected to miss the rest of the regular season, one huge benefactor of that will be Zach Ertz. Obviously, players like AJ Green and Christian Kirk, the other wide receivers on the team, will get a bump up as well. In terms of Rondell Moore, maybe he gets a slight bump, but he hasn't really been that consistent at all this season. James Conner is also banged up, and if he was to end up missing in this game, I think that a lot more red zone looks will go to Zach Ertz in this matchup. Last week, up against the LA Rams, he had 5 receptions on 7 targets for 42 yards. In my opinion, I think he scored in that game. They didn't call it a touchdown, obviously, and then James Conner plowed through and scored a touchdown, so technically he didn't score. but in my opinion, I think he did. Against a bottom-tier defense like the Detroit Lions that are just complete and utter dog shit, it should be no surprise that Zach Ertz could easily finish as a top 3 tight end in this matchup, so I love Zach Ertz up against the Detroit Lions. My final must-start player before we pivot into the must-sits is Foreman, running back of the Tennessee Titans, going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers this week in Pittsburgh. Foreman has been on a 2-game streak of solid performances. While there was a lot of confusion about who was actually going to be the lead running back between him and Dontrell Hilliard last week, based upon their performances, I believe that it is very safe to assume that Foreman will be the lead back going forward. Last week, he had 13 rushes for 47 yards as well as a touchdown. He also had 2 receptions for 15 yards up against the Jacksonville Jaguars. This week, he will face the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have been atrocious, absolutely terrible up against the run down the recent stretch of games, allowing over 190 yards to the running back in 2 of their 3 last matchups. The Titans are still without A.J. Brown, so it is safe to say that they will continue to use the ground and pound approach, heavily utilizing Foreman in this matchup. Before we pivot into the must-sit players of today's video, I would like to let you guys know that we have partnered with Yahoo Fantasy this NFL season to bring you guys some great offers. Check out our exclusive limited-time offer, which gets you guys 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. To qualify, you need to be new to Yahoo, sign up for an account via the link down below, deposit, and play. That's it. Yahoo will send us your name after you play in your first paid contest, and we'll reach out to you via email with your coupon. If you would like immediate access, that's okay as well. All you gotta do is email support@awesemo.com and we'll get you set up immediately. You can also claim a free $10 of site credit by clicking the link in the video description down below, which can be used to enter any Yahoo contest, including the $1 million NFL Baller. Make sure to use our DFS tools and projections designed specifically for Yahoo to give you guys the best shot at winning big. Back on into the video, make sure you guys do check out Yahoo Fantasy, link down below. We move to the must-sit category, headlined by Miles Sanders, running back of the Philadelphia Eagles, going up against the Washington football team this week. Sanders is expected to play this week after nursing an ankle injury during last week's bye that he suffered up against the Jets. In his last game, in week number 13 up against the Jets, he had 24 rushes for 120 yards and 3 receptions for 22 yards, which was the best play we've seen out of Miles Sanders all season. But this was without Jordan Howard, who is expected to play this week. If Howard gets the nod to play, then starting Sanders is an immense risk, as head coach Nick Sirianni just loves to give Jordan Howard the ball for some insane fucking reason. So when it comes to Miles Sanders, I would rather let him ride the pine up against the Washington football team if Jordan Howard plays. If for some reason Jordan Howard misses, then I will roll out Miles Sanders with confidence. My next must-sit is a tight end playing tonight, Jared Cook, tight end of the LA Chargers, going up against the Kansas City Chiefs. Last week, Jared Cook had a solid performance up against the New York Giants, having 2 receptions on 5 targets for 8 yards, as well as he scored a touchdown in that matchup. Though, much of the reason behind having a solid game was because he scored, as well as the fact that Keenan Allen was out. So with Cook being such a touchdown-dependent tight end, and with Allen returning this week, we should just steer right away from starting Jared Cook in this game. He's barely been scoring touchdowns this season, and when you're a, touchdown-dependent tight end, then you need to score. And while this could be a high-scoring game tonight, I just don't really want anything to do with Jared Cook. My next must-sit is Ryan Tannehill, quarterback of the Tennessee Titans, going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers this week in Pittsburgh. We just talked about a little bit ago the Tennessee Titans offense. Tannehill has only eclipsed 20 fantasy points twice this season. Over the last 4 weeks, he has had 2 games with fewer than 10 points. Half the time in the last 4 weeks, he was an immense disappointment. Last week up against the Jacksonville Jaguars, 20 completions on 31 attempts for 191 yards, as well as having 4 rushes for 29 yards and a touchdown. While the Steelers are far from some elite defense, the Tennessee Titans passing attack has been a complete and utter unmitigated disaster without A.J. Brown. So in my opinion, the fact that I like Foreman so much should tell you that, I think they're going to run the ball a lot in this game, and Ryan Tannehill will be unsuccessful. Maybe when A.J. Brown returns, potentially next week, Ryan Tannehill has a resurgence, but until we see that, I would rather leave Ryan Tannehill on the bench. And my final must-sit player of today's video is Jerry Jeudy, wide receiver of the Denver Broncos, going up against the Cincinnati Bengals this week at home in Denver. The issue with Jerry Jeudy really has nothing to do with the talent level of Jerry Jeudy and has everything to do with Teddy Bridgewater, as well as the offense becoming very run-heavy as of recently. Over the last 3 games, the Broncos ranked 3rd in rushing attempts per game with 34.3. Last week up against the Detroit Lions, a game where Jerry Jeudy should have a smash matchup. This is a very easy matchup for a wide receiver. Up against the sorry Detroit Lions defense, Jeudy has just 5 receptions on 6 targets for 47 yards. At this point in the season, starting any wide receivers from the Broncos is a huge risk, a huge liability to your roster. So even though Jeudy is the number 1 receiver there, I would rather just leave him on my bench. Again, the reason why they're running the ball so much for the Denver Broncos is because it's successful. When you hand the ball to Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon, you can move the ball, especially when Teddy Bridgewater doesn't like to air the ball out and throw it super far. You can just keep running the ball, give the ball to Jerry Jeudy every once in a while, and that's how they win the game. So just leave Jerry Jeudy on your bench. So thank you guys all so much for watching today's video. If you did end up enjoying, please make sure to hit that like button as well as that subscribe button. I would appreciate it a ton. And make sure you check out Yahoo Fantasy, link down below in the description. I love you guys all so much. I hope you have a great rest of your guys' day. And as always, good boy.